Running a business can be exhausting. Building your website shouldn't be. With Wix, you can express your ideas, give direction, then leave the heavy lifting to AI, from site creation to branded content and images. Have fun with the details. Customize what you want the way you want, and manage your whole business from a centralized dashboard with expert AI tools. Build, scale, and enjoy the incredible results. You can do it all yourself on Wix.
James, you wear a lot of hats. You're a veteran and household chef, a self-taught barber and dream chaser and student. You're an ander. At National University, we see the whole you. That's why we've created online and hybrid programs that flex to help you balance your full life so you can focus on what's right in front of you. National University, supporting the whole you. Learn more at nu.edu.
The talk did not start for hours, so the organizers were confused to see two guests arrive, especially because they were not scientists. They were law enforcement agents, bailiffs, and they had cameras and microphones, along with a court order to record the upcoming talk. The year was 2014 in Bordeaux, France. An 88-year-old cardiologist named Martha Gauthier was receiving an award and giving a talk on her role in discovering the cause of Down syndrome. The lecture organizers asked why on earth the bailiffs had court orders to record the talk. The men answered that there were rumors that Gauthier would be libeling someone during the talk, her former colleague Jérôme Lejeune. In fact, the bailiffs demanded to look at the slides that Gauthier planned to show during the talk. And in going through them, they pointed out several that they deemed libelous. By this point, the conference organizers were panicking. Would they be allowed to hold the talk? The bailiffs insisted yes, they did not want to censor anything. At the same time, they added darkly, if Gauthier libeled Lejeune even slightly, the 88-year-old grandmother would face the full fury of the law. From the Science History Institute, this is Sam Keene and the Disappearing Spoon, a topsy-turvy, science-y history podcast, where footnotes become the real story. Martha Gauthier was born in 1925, the fifth of 7 children to farmers in rural France. In 1944, her oldest sister was killed in Paris by Nazi troops. The sister had been a medical student, and Martha followed in her footsteps, becoming a pediatric cardiologist. In 1954, Martha secured a job in Paris, but deferred it for a year to accept a fellowship at Harvard. Upon arriving in Boston, she had just 24 whirlwind hours to find an apartment and furnish it before reporting for work the next day. There, she learned cell biology, including how to culture cells in petri dishes with incubators and serum. It was cutting-edge stuff. Upon returning to France, she learned that the job she'd been promised had gone to someone else. Frustrated, she took a job she was not thrilled about, doing research at a French hospital. She was one of just 2 women among the 80 residents there. Her research team was studying Down syndrome, a subject that she, a cardiologist, knew nothing about. But in fact, it was an exciting time in Down syndrome research. The genetics of Down syndrome was puzzling. If one identical twin had it, the other always did too. So there was clearly a genetic component. At the same time, it did not run in families like most genetic disorders. So what was going on? Then came an inspired suggestion. The head of Down syndrome research at the hospital was Raymond Cherpin. He proposed that Down syndrome resulted from a problem with people's chromosomes, the bundles of DNA in our cells. Perhaps people with Down syndrome were missing a chromosome. Cherpin wanted to examine the cells of people with Down syndrome and count their chromosomes. Unfortunately, as we heard last episode, that's far easier said than done. Like staring into a bowl of spaghetti and trying to count the number of noodles. Scientists didn't even know how many chromosomes humans have. But in 1956, biologist Joe Chio announced at a conference his discovery that humans have 46 chromosomes. Cherpin happened to attend that conference, and the talk electrified him. He realized that he could adopt Chio's technique for preparing cells, and then examine the chromosomes of people with Down syndrome. Cherpin returned to his hospital excited, then he realized there was a problem, a major one. Chio's technique for counting chromosomes required culturing cells, and as far as he knew, no one in France had the skills to do that. But when he explained the problem to his staff, Marthe Gauthier raised her hand. She had learned how to do that at Harvard. Turpin practically began jumping up and down in excitement. He put her on the job right away. Still, Turpin did not back up his enthusiasm with much support. He set Gauthier up in a bare lab with just a fridge, centrifuge, and a cheap microscope. He didn't pay her a salary, and she in fact took out a loan to buy glassware. For the serum to keep the cultured cells alive, she withdrew blood from her own arm. Despite these handicaps, Gauthier developed a new dye to make the chromosomes stand out more. She also developed an innovative technique of drying her cells a bit on her slides, then made them spread out, which made counting easier. She started by counting cells in people without Down syndrome to practice. Everything worked great. Time after time, she got 43, 44, 45, 46 chromosomes. Perfect. Then, in early 1958, she got some cells from a Down syndrome patient. She cultured and stained them, then deposited them on the slide to count. 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. Huh. She recounted with some different cells and got 47 again. It was another golden moment. People with Down syndrome do not lack chromosomes. They have too many. Even today, scientists don't quite know why the extra chromosome causes the symptoms of Down syndrome. The best guess is that having 3 copies of one chromosome results in having 3 copies of each gene on that chromosome as well, instead of the normal 2. When a fetus is developing, that causes the overproduction of certain proteins. And somehow, that overproduction derails normal development. For example, having 3 copies of the APP gene leads to the overproduction of the so-called amyloid beta peptide. This in turn causes snarls and tangles of proteins in the brain, which leads to impaired brain function in Down syndrome. Other symptoms probably arise for similar reasons. Regardless of the details, the extra chromosome does cause Down syndrome. And Marthe Gauthier had just discovered this fact in her lab. Only one question remained. Which chromosome was it? Again, humans have 46 chromosomes, divided into 23 nearly identical pairs. 2 are the X and/or Y chromosome. That leaves 22 other pairs. The longest pair are called chromosome 1. The second longest pair are called chromosome 2, and so on, down to the stubs of chromosomes 21 and 22. Now, if Gauthier had found that Down syndrome cells have an extra copy of chromosome 1 or 2, she could have determined its identity easily. Those are long chromosomes, and they look distinct. Unfortunately, the extra chromosome proved to be one of the stubs. And even when she squinted, she could not make out which one it was. Maybe 21 or 22? To her frustration, she simply could not tell with her cheap microscope. Right when her frustrations were boiling over, another doctor came knocking. Jérôme Lejeune worked in the Down syndrome ward at her hospital. And by all accounts, he was truly dedicated to his patients. Selfless, compassionate, a saint. Lejeune had heard about Gauthier's research and dropped by. She explained her frustrations, and he sympathized. He even offered to take her slides to another clinic with better microscopes to nail down the identity of the extra chromosome. His generosity thrilled Gauthier. She handed her slides right over, a moment that she would regret for the rest of her life.
Running a business can be exhausting. Building your website shouldn't be. With Wix, you can express your ideas, give direction, then leave the heavy lifting to AI, from site creation to branded content and images. Have fun with the details. Customize what you want the way you want. And manage your whole business from a centralized dashboard with expert AI tools. Build, scale, and enjoy the incredible results. You can do it all yourself on Wix.
Jérôme Lejeune was good to his word. He took Marthe Gauthier's slides to a lab with better equipment. There, he himself determined that the extra chromosome was number 21. People with Down syndrome have 3 copies of it. It was a landmark achievement, tracing a medical disorder all the way down to a chromosome, a sure thing Nobel Prize. But Lejeune did not tell Gautier what he discovered. For her, an empty month passed, then a few more. Even after 6 months, she still had not heard anything from the nice doctor. She started to worry, and she was right to worry. Behind her back, Lejeune secured samples from 2 more Down syndrome patients. He confirmed that they also had 3 copies of chromosome 21. Finally, after 7 months, Lejeune returned to Gautier's lab and handed her a paper that he had written on his research. Gautier was stunned. What was this paper? Then she glanced at the names, and her shock turned to anger. Lejeune had listed 3 authors, his first, then hers, then Raymond Chapon, head of the department. That order implied that Lejeune had done the most important work, and would therefore get the credit. Gautier was listed second, where you would normally put a technician. And to add insult to injury, Lejeune had misspelled Marthe Gautier's name, both of them. But Gautier couldn't do anything. French hospitals had hierarchies as strict as the military, and Lejeune stood 2 full ranks above her. Unlike Zhou Qiu, she swallowed her protests and let the paper get published, misspelled name and all. Now, to be somewhat fair, Lejeune always mentioned Gautier in interviews about the work, and he praised her. He also insisted that he could not have identified the 21st chromosome without her. But as the years passed, media stories began to heap praise on Lejeune as the sole discoverer of the cause of Down syndrome, and he did not exactly go out of his way to dispel that notion. He just sat back and basked in the praise. In fact, Lejeune almost certainly would have won a Nobel Prize, except for one thing. Lejeune was very Catholic, very devout, and he followed the Catholic line in opposing abortion. He was especially upset that his work made genetic screening possible. Because of him, in countries where abortion was legal, doctors could now withdraw amniotic fluid from pregnant women, screen the fetus's chromosomes for Down syndrome, and abort the fetus if the parents desired. Lejeune considered this an abomination. He spoke out passionately against it. He had always cared deeply for people with Down syndrome, and he did not want them culled. But this stance put him at odds with virtually all of his colleagues who supported abortion. Lejeune got into so many fights over this that he basically argued his way out of a Nobel Prize. No colleague would even nominate him. And the real irony is this. Zhou Qiu in Sweden had first counted 46 chromosomes using lung tissue from aborted fetuses, which means Lejeune would never have made his discovery if abortion had not been legal in Sweden. But Lejeune did not care. Eventually, Lejeune died of lung cancer in 1994. In his honor, his family established a foundation to continue his work of caring for patients with Down syndrome. But that's not all the foundation does. It also aggressively defends his legacy, including against what it calls the revisionist smears of Marthe Gautier. After the original, misleading paper about Down syndrome and chromosome 21 appeared, Gautier dropped out of biomedical research and became a respected cardiologist. And she did not hate Lejeune. They continued to exchange letters, and she addressed him as her dear friend. But in 2007, something funny happened. Although Lejeune's anti-abortion stand probably cost him a Nobel Prize, it also won him the friendship and admiration of Pope John Paul II and the Vatican. As a result, Lejeune was adored in Catholic circles. So much so that his admirers started pushing to canonize him as a saint. In addition, 2009 was the 50th anniversary of the key Down syndrome paper, and newspapers began running retrospective stories that always mentioned Lejeune, but never Gautier. And this pissed Gautier off. She realized that she was being written out of history. And to be clear, she never tried to take full credit. She never claimed that she'd identified chromosome 21, but only because she had never had the chance. She also insisted that she had first identified the presence of 47 chromosomes overall. So in 2009, Gautier went to the media and started telling her story. She found sympathetic ears. Scientists and historians had finally started reckoning with the scores and scores of women like her who had had credit stolen from them in many scientific fields. Gautier was a perfect example. For its part, the Lejeune Foundation dismisses Gautier's claims. Unlike Lejeune himself, they attribute both the identification of chromosome 21 and the discovery of the 47th chromosome to Lejeune alone. As evidence, the Foundation points to Lejeune's lab book. There, in May 1958, he clearly stated that he could see 47 chromosomes in Gautier's slides. Unfortunately, Gautier does not have any comparable records from an earlier date. It's not clear whether she was lax about recording things or just lost her notebook. But there's zero hard evidence linking her to the discovery. It's just her word. In addition, in October 1958, the department head Raymond Turpin wrote a letter in which he mentioned that Gautier was still finding 46 chromosomes in her cells, not 47. Now, this letter came from Turpin, not Gautier, so maybe he misunderstood her work or was simply wrong. He would not be the first oblivious boss in history, but it does not look great for Gautier's cause. In addition, the Foundation also questions why Gautier and Lejeune kept exchanging warm letters. They ask why. If Lejeune really stole credit, she remained so friendly. Despite these arguments, most of France took Gautier's side, and there was such a swell of support that in 2014, the French Foundation for Human Genetics awarded Gautier a top prize. She was 88 years old then, but better late than never. Except the ceremony to award the prize never happened. The Lejeune Foundation caught wind of it and sent 2 bailiffs to court to secure permission to record her talk. The bailiffs also barged into the lecture hall early, demanded to see her slides, and muttered darkly about libel. In a somewhat cowardly move, the geneticists running the ceremony decided to cancel it. They feared being sued into bankruptcy. Then they slunk over to Gautier's hotel room, where they handed her the medal, still in its box. They also later lied and told the public that she had been too sick to appear. But if the Lejeune Foundation thought that they had won this confrontation, they were wrong. Honestly, Gautier's talk probably never would have received much attention outside of France if it had taken place as scheduled. But the Foundation's tactics, effectively shutting down a scientist with threats of lawfare, stirred up a mess of a controversy. As a result, far more people heard about the affair, and also heard Gautier's side of things. Sometimes life is ironic like that. And the really frustrating thing is that there is plenty of credit to go around. People often like to reduce science to aha moments, to seeing Gautier seeing the 47th chromosome and leaping up and screaming, "We!" But as even she admitted, that was not enough. Although he used underhanded means, it was Lejeune who determined that the extra chromosome was number 21. Importantly, he also did the work to confirm that in other cases. But even if you dismiss Lejeune, what about Raymond Turpin? After all, it was him who first proposed that people with Down syndrome have chromosomal abnormalities, a big leap. Without him, neither Gautier nor Lejeune could have done their work. It's quite rare for one person to discover something alone. And in some ways, this story is still being written. Gautier died in 2022, but a year earlier, Lejeune's bid for sainthood took a big step forward when the Vatican officially venerated him. Papal officials are now investigating whether they can attribute any miracles to Lejeune, the next step in canonizing him. If that happens, expect to hear more impassioned defenses and more rabid denunciations about the sins of this would-be saint. This is the Disappearing Spoon podcast, brought to you by the Science History Institute. Be sure to check out their in-depth science history podcast, Distillations. You can find it anywhere you get your podcasts, or on their website, distillations.org. You can find more incredible stories in my books or at samkeen.com. You can also book me as a speaker there for your school or event. If you like this podcast, please spread the word and support it at patreon.com/disappearingspoon. You can also get bonus episodes and signed books at Patreon. This episode was written by me, Sam Keen. It was produced by Mariel Carr, Rigoberto Hernandez, and Sarah Kaplan. Our sound design, scoring, and mixing is by Justin Berger of Row Home Productions. Row Home's creative director is Alex Lewis. John Myers is Row Home's executive producer. Thanks for listening.
Row Home Productions.
Got an amazing business idea, but haven't locked in a domain name? Search Wix Domains and claim yours before someone else snags it. Your ideal.com, .net, .u is out there. Search Wix Domains and set your brand in motion.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.